And we continue the fourth and the final day of Positive Hack Days. And now, the next topic we're going to be exploring is probably the most trendy. We know that AI is developing by leaps and bounds, and we have already been discussing how it helps you in video production. On the Friday poetry night, it was generating graphics. Maybe even the scenario of what I'm saying right now was written by ChatGPT. I cannot say 100%. But are those concerns justified that AI may also replace programmers? We can hear that once in a while, and some people begin to give you advice like, don't become a programmer because anyway, everything will be written by GPT, at least on a kind of low code level. Is that fair to say that? We'll ask the head of the NLP group from the MTS company, Valentin Malykh. Hello everyone. My name is Valentin, and today I will share what are the models for code. If we're saying that ChatGPT may replace programmers, what may it mean, and what's the whole point? And let's try to look into that. Okay, great. So what do I want to say? To begin with, let us try to discuss what is programming, basically. If you're here, probably you're interested. Let's try to identify what is programming all about. Strangely enough, programming is basically almost the same as speaking or writing. Meaning that we as programmers, we are writing something, we are writing a program, like a certain text, and this text then explains to a computer how to do something. We're saying that, hey, we have like a certain text, please do, make me a coffee. We know computers cannot do this, but in some kind of future, we will see this happening. Okay, so this is programming. Is that true or not? What I've defined would be the simplest thing, but actually, it's common to think that programming is somewhat different. That we have like an individual who has gone to some kind of courses and classes to be able to write fast in the code. It is not a natural language like make me a coffee, but a special construction, special languages of programming, even like a language. And basically, if you studied English in school, then programming language would be almost the same as to learn English. You are learning new language, and usually programmers are studying several languages to be able to be efficient. So, programming is quite a complex job because you have to learn some kind of foreign languages. And what is going on with it? What am I trying to convey to you is that in programming, it is not about learning some kind of computer language. It is not even about being able to write in these languages. Programming is about coming up with solutions for problems. Let's go back to our example with making coffee. When we say to a certain hypothetical computer, make me some coffee, what should it do? Let's assume that as a computer we have, like a robot, and this robot has some hands, and it can go to your kitchen. It knows how to go to your kitchen and to grab a pack of coffee, then to pour it into your coffee machine. I mean, the whole process. So, we need to explain to this kind of robot how to make coffee. We're saying, okay, make 2 steps forward, 3 steps to the right, and you will see like a cupboard. Open it, you feel it, like so. There is a set of simple actions, and this set of actions, robot has to perform to be able to fulfill your top tier or top level assignment. You are describing top level assignment so that it would be implemented. So we are describing low level things and trying to solve whatever we want. So I'm defining programming as a solution of the top tier assignment or problem. Our goal is to understand how the top tier goal, of making coffee, how can we structure, how we can represent it so that it would be understandable on the low level. And this is programming. And how to write, like how the robot should go to the kitchen and grab a bag of coffee and brew it. It is a low-level programming. If we will dive deep into history, go back into history for a couple of minutes, then I'll say that in the beginning, when computers first showed up, they showed up when 80 years ago, like calculators, the first ones. The programming was like a low-level programming. Grab a piece of information from here, then add it to something else, minus something, apply some operation, and that's it. And out of it, you had, like all these kind of pieces, you had to assemble a top-tier problem. The next was like a high-level languages, about in 1970s. And the latest, for example, 20-30 languages, we have even higher languages, which are virtual, working in virtual machines, but we do not care about that. We only care that we as humanity are moving from the less abstract to more abstract. And programming is still a programming. That is, while previously we had to write zeros and ones, now we have to type, some words in English to be able to deal with that. And this is the main idea. That is, we have some kind of low-level programming, which is on the slang we refer to as coding, and high-level programming, which I believe is like the programming proper. And I want to say that hopefully you will not leave me if I'll say that programming per se will never go away, but coding may be transformed. Like what could happen? You and I need to understand the following. What is AI for a programmer? I've been describing for quite a long time what programming is all about. But let's see what AI for a programming is all about. So we have a programmer, like a human, who knows programming languages, and they're writing something on these languages, and we want to help them. We want them to write faster. How can we do that? In part, like I've told you, we have a low-level languages. That is when we're writing zeros and ones, and now very few are working with them. Then high-level languages, where we have like quite a deeper abstractions, and now we're writing almost in English. Maybe the day will come we'll be writing in Russian, but who knows? Anyway. So this person is writing, and we want to accelerate writing of this code. We can suggest like a following word or the following even the piece of the text, so that they would be able to write faster. And of course, we cannot do it like in a simple way, because we have a problem. If the next word we can guess with a high probability, of course, depending on how you measure, like 80 to 90% probability, then the whole chunk of the text, to guess it is quite difficult. And I think that if you've ever read any book in your life, you know that it's hard to predict the whole portion of the text, and we will not be able to achieve this. So we need to understand how can we predict it more efficiently. And so for the programmer, it is such a thing which, they take it and which would suggest you as a programmer some things, upcoming things. Maybe the next word, maybe how to, to add some new function, new method, something like that. I'll try not to use specific lingo and language not to scare you off, guys. So let's agree that AI for a programmer is something like an entity which will help programmer to write faster. It is not like you're typing the whole text, but you're typing 2 words and the third will be suggested to you. So that means that you accelerate the work by 30%. It's a very just a rough example.
Вот есть непосредственно пример.
Here is a chunk of the code. You can see that this example is taken from the Microsoft company. The Microsoft has issued their own programmer helper, Copilot, Microsoft Copilot. And maybe you've heard about the chat GPT. And the Copilot, if you simplify it, this would be like a chat GPT for programmers. And in this video, in this picture, the guy is writing only description in plain English language, and AI is suggesting to them the code, I mean, the implementation of what the person wanted with the code. So the person was writing on natural language, in this case in English, and AI would write a piece of code. And of course, this is just an example. And in real life, it doesn't happen that easy and good. But the main principle is here. The person is writing something very abstract, and they are working on a task, they are programming. And writing a code, in this case, was done by AI. And I believe this is the main case that we need to talk about.
Какие есть задачи в помощнике программиста?
Now, what are the assignments of this kind of a programming assistant? I've shown you this picture of how on a technical level, you can do this. If you look at this diagram from the left to right, then on the left you can see text understanding. As you can remember, the program is also a text, and text understanding is a goal which we take like a text, we upload it into a model, and then this model can classify the text, or to look for similar text, or to look for some kind of like connected text, somehow connected or interconnected. And this is understanding. We are not generating. And despite of that, this is also very useful. If you, like back in school, you were writing like an essay, you remember that it would be great if you make an inquiry, like with this person, or Pushkin, Russian poet, you'd be able to see some different kind of articles, like you would do in a Google, for example. So the two types of tasks on the right, those are the tasks of generation. And we have a model which does not only read text, but also generates this text. So she can write this text. On the previous slide, I've shown you an example where we have, a natural language description, like a prompt, and AI wrote us a code. And here on the right, you can see how it happens. So we have an assignment, a task like a code generation, a test for code generation, because the code that is written is also need to be tested. And this could be, searching for bugs in the code, maybe bug fixing. There are lots of those like a sub-goals which are not limited by one generation only. Okay, fine. I think it makes sense, like what's going on. And let's try to see next. I've told you about the AI for programmer. This is what it looks like. If you've ever seen maybe in a culture university on the object-oriented language, you can see how it looks. You are calling for an object, you put a dot, and then you have a menu with different properties of this object. Those properties, maybe some methods, maybe some kind of list of what is specific to this object of programming. And the choice of this next word, in this case, after the dot, it's up to a human. But we can take this list, and out of this list we can beforehand to select the most probable. And by doing this, we can speed up the work of a programmer. You can say, yeah, I agree, and that's it. And you are switching to writing a different word. And then of course, we save a lot of time. This is what it looks like. It's like an auto-filling. Maybe you've seen this kind of auto-filling, but not as a programmer, but as just a user, like a smartphone user. Then a smartphone, like today, I was writing my smartphone, and my phone would always suggest me the next word. Sometimes it's a nonsense, but sometimes it's good, and you can save a lot of time.
And we can actually save a lot of time, which will be great. So let us look forward. What else do we have? Probably many of you have used the service, translation service. For example, there is Google, there is Yandex. There are other companies that have machine translation, and you put there is something in Russian, and then it translates it into English. And the same applies to programming languages too. It might be a little bit more rare, but it actually exists. If we need to change something from one programming language to another, it's basically the same translation. As you remember, programming languages are the same as foreign languages, and you have to study them. So the translation, and by the way, if you ever dealt, or maybe doubled into translation from Russian into English, you know it's actually work, and if we can make it simpler with helper, with an assistant, in our case, then we can use a co-pilot, and then it actually helps us. It actually makes our life easier. I had this kind of experience going from an old programming language to a new programming language, and it's actually not that easy because the same idea in one programming language has to be explained and interpreted in a different programming language, and you need some very nuanced knowledge in order to understand what actually happens there, and then you need syntax. You need to know how to write it in a different language. Okay, I already mentioned error correction, error search, and I think error search is very important. And if you have a smartphone, you probably encountered some cases where you have errors in your applications, they have glitches. And there are mistakes and there are errors in the code, it's normal, people make mistakes, and if you probably tried to do anything, you probably made typos, mistakes and errors yourself. Obviously for programmers this looks different, because it's not like impossible to make a typo in a code. It is possible, but if your typo significantly affects the syntax of a programming language, and what I mean by syntax, when you write something in Russian, then if you make a mistake in a single letter, then usually it does not affect the whole message. But if you, for example, place a word in its wrong case, maybe you say that mother loves daughter, but if instead of daughter you say, for example, floor. Mother loves floor. It sounds weird. Maybe she mops floor, but she doesn't really love floor. So if you just choose a different word, maybe different verb, different object, then it would be a little bit weird, a little bit strange. But for programming languages, if we violate syntaxes, and it's very easy to violate the syntax, it's much more rigid compared to natural languages, then we will notice this problem at once, because there are syntactic parsers, and they tell us, here is a mistake, and you should double check it. But there are more complex problems and mistakes, like logical errors. Now going back to the original thesis. Programming is about building a program, is about the logic, but the implementation is a low-level problem. It's not a high-level problem. If you have a logical problem, syntax parser will not highlight it. And maybe artificial intelligence will be able to do so, which would be great. Or at least we try to do so, and maybe we will reach this kind of development soon. Next. This is what it looks for a programmer. And well, this is what an IDE looks like. We have a certain screen. We have a program running there, which is basically integrated design environment, IDE, and a person writes a code there. There are many very useful features there, and this is where we implement our AI inside the IDE. Just like when you write a code or maybe write a message using your smartphone, you have a prompt. Maybe you can select from one of the suggestions And the same happens for programmers. A programmer would reach a certain point, then they use this dot keyboard, maybe they want to add some kind of method, and then they have this pop-up menu and they can select one of them. So here, what should be mentioned? Everything I covered before, including the smartphone, all of them use language models. So what is a language model? Do you remember the previous example where mother loves floor or mother loves daughter? I believe we do understand the relationship between mothers and daughters, and you probably know that mother, if you are saying mother loves, you would expect some person instead, not object. You would expect an animate object, usually person, not an inanimate object. And the same applies to programmers. We also have some kind of language model that predicts the next word. So in our case, we can go for literature. There could be different phrases, like no man is an island. Obviously, if you know this quotation, you know what follows the no man is, and everybody knows that the following would be an island, because everybody knows this, and everybody expects this word in this quotation, and this is how language models work. Just a few words on how large language models are built. LLMs is basically the same as language models, and it predicts the next word, but it's trained on very, very big data sets with lots of text in natural languages. We basically fed it the whole Congress library, and then we also fed all the code available to us in the same mode, just trying to predict the next word in a code. And this is what large language models look like. That's why it's called large, not because it was trained on big data sets, it is partially true, but not exactly, but because it has billions of different parameters. Now let us move to the conclusions. In my presentation, I wanted to say this. Programming, if we take a look at it as a problem, as a way to solve a problem, some kind of problem, it will remain. People will solve problems because in order to understand the problem, in order to structure the problem, it is a human task, at least so far. But the technical tools, the ways to solve the problem, to actually implement the solution, those technical solutions already exist. They use AI and they will be only better. And obviously the smartphones, which I already mentioned multiple times. And I do remember those olden times when T9 only appeared, the way to provide auto-suggestion, even smartphones did not have all this T9 feature. And it was not very good with auto-suggestion. Current smartphones are much better with providing potential auto-suggestions. And this kind of methodology would be better and better. It would only improve. On the other hand, well, the methodology would improve, but the tasks, the problem to talk to a person, for example, in a messenger or maybe write a program, which is basically the same as having a conversation, we will still have this kind of problem. So my personal opinion that AI will not replace humans, but humans will start using more, well, let's say smarter tools. Everybody says smart tools, that's why I use this word too. And this is what I would like to wrap up my presentation. Thank you very much for your attention. I'm ready to take your questions. Thank you, Valentin. I am a doctor, I'm from medicine. In my experience, I work with AI, and you are talking about synthetic intelligence, where this AI does not replace a doctor, but they become basically a new entity, basically a cyborg. Is it the same in AI? Is this the same in programming? Answer. It's actually easier because there are sensitive domains like law, medicine, and some areas are very sensitive where it's critical to be correct. Obviously, it's clear for medicine, it's all about human lives. We cannot go without humans, and it's much stricter in medicine. But for programming, it's much lenient. For example, if there is a mistake in the code, probably nothing catastrophic would happen, even though sometimes there are examples. And I do have to say that people don't really treat that so seriously. Maybe they're wrong. So do you think about the synthetic intelligence? Would it be used in programming? I think it would be. All the new programmers, so the younger programmers, use this synthetic intelligence term, and obviously they will do it later. So if you cannot use ChatGPT, then you won't be really a good programmer in the future world, or maybe you'll be slower compared to your peers. Thank you very much, Andrei. Valentin Malykh,